I'd like to introduce Jeff May. He's our presenter for this Tech Talk with the GIS Trek on web services and essentially cybersecurity. So the floor is all yours, Jeff. And thanks for doing this presentation for us.
Hey, thank you very much, Keith. It's my pleasure to speak on this topic today. I'm going to turn off these subtitles if you don't mind, folks. I wish we could say, Keith, that we plan to have this topic on Cybersecurity Month, but purely coincidental that we're talking about data security today in this month of October, which, as you said, is Cybersecurity Month in the state of Idaho. I do need to apologize to folks. You might notice that the title that you're seeing on the screen differs from what was originally broadcast by Keith. And the reason for that is that exploit that I had discovered that kind of prompted this topic seems to have been patched or otherwise, for whatever reason, I was unable to reproduce that behavior, but I'm still going to point it out when I get to that point in my demonstration today, just so you folks can be aware of it as something you might want to check once you're, validating your security position for your web services. So the talk today is web services and Survey123, data security configurations you need to know about. And so consider these two items. That securing response data and public-facing GIS web services require several configurations, not all of which are well documented or easy to find documentation on. And also that ensuring that data containing PII or personally identifiable information or other sensitive information submit through a public service is not accessible to unauthorized users is the responsibility of all GIS professionals creating web services. So as GIS professionals, we are instrumental in implementing this the security posture to make sure that our data, when needed, is secure as it needs to be. So looking into some of the available documentation you might have seen online, and we can share these slides, or these links will be available later. So I'm not going to click through each one now. But one of the primary documents that I've seen that speaks to security configurations in Survey123 and the web services that those applications consume is this document titled Limiting Access to Public Survey123 Responses. Now, if you're familiar with this document, or even if you're not, what it speaks to is surveys that are published using ArcGIS Online or that consume hosted feature layers. And it speaks to those configurations available on those hosted feature layers. But one thing that it noticeably omits is how you implement these same security best practices in an ArcGIS enterprise environment where you have registered data that you're using to build these web services that are pushed into your surveys. And so that's really going to be the scope of my talk today, is how we configure these web services that are built using registered data that's coming from your backend relational database management system. And then there's some other online documents, this ArcGIS Survey123 Connect, how to secure data. There's a tune and configure services help doc online, and then a white paper that Esri also has. But again, like limiting access to public Survey123 responses, the details specifically for ArcGIS enterprise service deployments is a miss. So again, that's why I wanted to talk specifically about this today. So in this deployment scenario, just to speak it clearly, we're considering this scenario where we have public-facing services published to ArcGIS Enterprise, where the public are submitting sensitive information that you don't want exposed outside of your organization. For us at Fish and Game, we have a lot of cases where we need to retain records for long periods of time, and those records may change year over year. And we want to track those changes as they happen, and the best way to do that is by using the archiving functionality of the enterprise geodatabase. So this is why we typically publish these services from databases we have on the back end versus using like a hosted feature layer where we would have to manually automate that backup process. We just prefer to take advantage of that advanced functionality of the enterprise geodatabase. So we use a lot of registered data in our infrastructure. So at this point, I'd like to show some of the services we have in our development GIS environment, and review some of the configuration options of map and feature services, and show you how they impact the allowed operations that are accessible to users on your web services. So I'm just going to pull over my browser window here. And you're seeing now our REST service directory for this Tech Talk registered data service. This is something I stood up special for this talk today. And you'll see there's one layer and one table within this service. We have a layer called registered events, which might be some arbitrary event that takes place at a specific location at a specific time. And then for these events, we have people who need to register for the events. And if we look at the attributions for this service, we have things like name, address, email, and phone number, personally identifiable information that we wouldn't necessarily want to be exposing to the public. So in this scenario, we have a public-facing survey that anonymous users are going to be submitting PII through. And as the GIS service administrator, I need to make sure that this data is secure and not available to anybody outside my organization. There is a relationship class set up on this service, so the events relate to the registered applicants. And that was kind of the basis for this exploit that I had found previously that I'll talk about a little bit more. But right now, if we inspect the capabilities of this service, it's just the standard configurations that you get when you publish this service from ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap. We have query attachments, query related records, and I probably should have done this in a private browser. But you can see that I'm not logged in. So for all intents and purposes, I'm an anonymous user at this point. I can go into any of these layers and execute a query, and everybody's favorite, 1 = 1 star, to get to all the data. And as an anonymous user, I can see all the data, all this personally identifiable information that's contained within our database. And this is what I want to shut down. So how I'm going to do this is through ArcGIS Server Manager, and I have this in this tab here, and I'm already in my Tech Talk registered data service. And so I'm going to select the capabilities item, and we can inspect what operations are presently allowed. So when we publish a service from ArcGIS Pro, unlike a hosted feature layer, we're always going to get the feature server and the map server. And both of these service types have configurations that you need to implement in order to make it secure, because I can query data from the feature service. I can also query it from the map server. So both of those services need to be given our consideration. So let's look at the let's look at the map service first. And you can see I have all the basic operations allowed. Map, which is going to let you visualize the spatial data on a web map or in some application. We have our query service, which I don't really think is named appropriately, because you'd think that by deselecting this item that would turn off query capabilities, but it in fact does not do that. This operation allows for the identify function to execute. So when you click on a feature on a map, it will perform that identify method and return those attributes for that feature. So that's one thing we would want to turn off. And then it's this data capability that actually turns on and off those query and query related records operations. So I just want to go through this sequentially. We'll turn off query. I'm going to save and restart this service, and then we'll go back and look at our map server here. Let me click into our event registrants, and you can see, even though I disabled query, I still have query attachments, query related records, all this. But what I don't have is that identify feature. And if I want to make it even more secure, I go back to my service capabilities and server manager, and I also unselect the data option. And I can save and restart my service again and refresh my REST details. And you can see most of my query options have been removed. I can no longer execute standard queries, query attachments, query analytics, but I still see this query related records option. And this was the source of the exploit that I was able to uncover. It was about a month or two ago. Even though I had these capabilities turned off, I could go in, query related records. I have access to the relationship information and the attributes. So I could come in here, I could specify some type of object ID. We know these are auto incrementing numbers. So, you know, a savvy user wouldn't have too difficult time guessing some object IDs to get to the data. Then I can specify my relationship ID. And right now it's going to tell me the operation is not supported. This is why I think either this exploit has been patched, or originally I just didn't have my service configured in a way that actually denied this capability. But I still wanted to point this out. When you're verifying the security position for your own servers, this is going to be something that you want to check, that even though you have query and data capabilities turned off, that you're still not able to query related records. Because what I was seeing previously was I could still get to that PII data, even though I had turned off those query capabilities. So something to point out, but at this point, it looks like this exploit's been patched, which is a good thing. Not good for my presentation today, but in general, a good thing for all of us as users of this technology. A couple additional steps that you can take to make this data even more secure. So at this point, we've secured the attribution itself, but say that the location information, that precise point was something that we wanted to keep secure as well. You can disable the map operation, and that will keep you from loading the layer in a web map and actually seeing the location of these individual records. One thing to note, though, that if you do implement this configuration like this, if you attempt to overwrite your service from ArcGIS Pro, it's not going to be able to locate the service. You would actually need to go back through Server Manager, re-enable the map operation, and then overwrite your service. And then afterwards, if you chose to, you could remove this mapping operation again. And then the other thing that I like to do, just to ensure that nothing is coming back from this service, if we go to our parameters, you can just change your maximum number of records returned by the server to 0, and that is going to prevent anything from coming back, being returned in a response from this service. And this was what needed to be implemented in order to ensure that that previous exploit that I mentioned wasn't going to return any data. Because even if you turned off the query, you could still get to those related records. And I actually had to set this maximum number of records returned by the server to 0 to ensure that no data was coming back from this service. Of course, if you were to try and look at your survey at this point in the Survey123 web client, it's not going to load anything. And effectively, you're not going to be able to manage a survey from the Survey123 web client with this configuration. But there's a way around that. And we'll talk about that in just a moment when we get to the feature services that you might prop up for your internal organization. But that covers the map service. And then for the feature access, this controls the operations allowed for the feature layer. So if we go into the feature service here and inspect the allowed operations, we'll see some similar operations here that we did on the map service. And so we want to turn those off as well. In order for anonymous users to submit data through your survey, create always has to be enabled, but we're going to turn off this query operation, and that's going to remove those methods, making sure that users can't query this service and get to that data. And so if we go back and refresh our REST directory here, you can see that all those query operations have been removed. And unlike the map service, it also removed the query related records method. So a little bit of difference in between the two service types there. And so I would just want to check my feature access again and make sure it's configured correctly. And I feel pretty good that the data can no longer be queried from this service. Now, assuming we still need to access this data, though, we just turned off all these capabilities. So that doesn't really give your users within your organization the ability to access this data. And so what you would do is implement a pattern similar to what you see when you're working with hosted feature services on ArcGIS Online or a portal for ArcGIS. And that's effectively just to create an additional service that you might see in ArcGIS Online. You update who you can share your survey results with for your survey through the Survey123 web client. and that creates a view of your service. It calls it like service underscore stakeholders or service underscore results, and then that's a view that you can use internally for your staff. And so we kind of mimic that in an ArcGIS enterprise environment. So if I go back to my Tech Talk directory here and just log in, you can see that there are a couple secured services that I've suffixed with this stakeholder keyword. And this is the service that I'm going to build into applications that are intended to be used by my organizational users. So my fishing game colleagues who might need to access this data and work with this data, view it in a dashboard or what have you. And this is where I enable all those operations that they need to work with that data or query it to visualize it. So we separate, we create separate services for the different use cases. So we have our public-facing service that is used exclusively for entering new data into our database from our Survey123 web form. And then I have an additional service. It's published from the same data set, but just has different operations exposed. And I make sure that I just share that with my organizational users, and they have to authenticate to access that service as well. With that, let me pull my presentation back over. And I just wanted to recap some of these security configurations. So when we're talking about registered map services, if these are public-facing services that we're using to receive new data from anonymous users, but we don't want them to access the results that are submitted, we need to make sure we disable query and data capabilities. And we can go even further by disabling the map capability and setting the maximum number of records returned by the server to 0. And this will effectively lock that service down. You're not getting anything back from it, though anonymous users can still submit data through the service. And then with respect to our registered feature services, we want to make sure we disable the query operation and make sure if there are any other operations that are enabled, that we disable them as well, with the exception of that create operation, which needs to be active in order for anonymous users to submit data through your Survey123 web form. Now to wrap things up, I want to show everybody one tool that's available from ArcGIS security team, and this is ArcGIS Security Advisor. I have that pulled up in my tab as well. And though there's an option to connect to ArcGIS Enterprise, admittedly, I've spoken to some of these security team personnel, they're still working on this feature. But for ArcGIS Online, it works quite well. So I'm going to click ArcGIS Online, and it's just asking me to authenticate. So in order to use this, I had to register this application on Portal. So if you're unfamiliar with how to register applications on your Portal or your ArcGIS Online site, you can find that documentation online, but you have to register the web application to obtain an app ID. And hadn't I already logged in, it would ask me for a Portal or ArcGIS Online URL and an application ID to authenticate. So I've already done that. So I'm just going to click allow, and it's going to provide me a real kind of streamlined breakdown of my security posture for my ArcGIS Online site. And this option on the left says public Survey123 check. You click that, and it's going to give you a breakdown of all the capabilities of all of your surveys that are hosted on this ArcGIS Online site. So I can see what surveys are out there, what capabilities they provide, and what might be publicly available that I don't necessarily want to be available to the public. So this provides a way to really quickly assess your security posture for ArcGIS Online. And I expect that, well, I've been told by the Esri security team that they're working on a release for this that will make it able to run with ArcGIS Enterprise sites. So stay tuned for that. And again, these links are available in my slides. We can make those available, or Keith will have the links available in his in the YouTube video that he posts for this Tech Talk as well. So that is going to conclude my Tech Talk today. I appreciate everybody joining today. My email is on the screen if you need to record that, and get in touch with me for whatever reason down the road. I'm happy to engage in any type of GIS discussions with our GIS user community here. So thank you very much for attending today. And I guess with that, we can spend some time in a Q&A.